Hey friends, welcome back to another Field and Garden podcast. It is your friend in flowers, Lisa Mason Ziegler, and I really appreciate you dropping in. And I have a story to share with you guys today, and it's about the origin story of the big calendar, which if you've read any of my books, it's included with those. It's been a part of flower farming school. I did a master class on it for the Flower Farmer Club. It's been a really big piece of how I managed my flower farm for all these years. And so I want to kind of tell you the story of how it came to be and developed, because we are just thrilled to pieces that we have developed our own big calendar dash journal, because that's what this calendar becomes. When you use it, it becomes an effective and powerful planning tool for your future seasons. And it's created in a way that it's easy to look back. The thing that I always dreamed that a garden journal would be, but a garden journal just never really fit the bill. And so now I'm all these years in, and this calendar journal is, I attribute much of my success, organization, which I'm not an organized person, and my ability to start seeds when they're supposed to be started, which was the root of the whole thing. I want to first just say, if you're new here, I want to give you an extra welcome. And if you want to learn more about us and all the work that we do, thegardenersworkshop.com is home base to everything that you hear us mention, from our online garden shop, our online courses, our live gardening show, the Flower Farmer Club. We have a lot of resources and tons of free resources. Check out our blog, our podcasts. And so don't forget to drop in there when and if you have the need. We'd love to have you. So when I had been flower farming for a while, I was juggling a lot of balls and not really juggling them all. I was dropping them constantly. And so what I faced is I just could not wrap my head around, first off, succession planting, and then I just never got to it. We just never, we never had time, or I didn't make time. I didn't see how we could make time. And I'll tell the little story about the man and the sunflowers. So this is long before I started planting sunflowers every week, but I had a customer at the Yorktown Farmers Market that came in my booth one day, had never seen him before, and I said, "Oh, those are really nice sunflowers." And I said, "Well, thanks." And he said, $2 each, huh? Now, y'all, this was like 20 years ago. And I said, "Yes, they are $20. They're $2 each." And he proceeded to try to bargain with me, and I just wouldn't bite. I said, "Well, if you can find them for that cheap, I'd say you better get them, And so we talked for a minute, and he finally caved. I wasn't talking him into buying them. I was just carrying on conversation with him. Well, he finally said, "All right, give me 3. So he bought 3 for $6. Well, he came back the next week and said, "You're exactly right. These sunflowers still look great, and they're 7 days old. I've never had sunflowers do that, and I don't even need new sunflowers this week." I said, "Well, good, because I don't have any." And so the next week he came back and wanted more sunflowers because his had finally died. Well, I didn't have any. Right about that same time, I had attended one of the very first conferences I ever went to, and one of the pieces of that conference was going on a farm tour, and it was going to be an all-day event. We were going to have sessions there and look around the farm. And the first thing that I heard Vicki say was how she started 1,000 sunflowers a week, because we saw them planted all over in different stages all over her farm, just like you find them on my farm, y'all. And she then went on to explain to us her strategy, that she planted 1,000 a week. She'd rather throw away 300 a week than to not have them. And so she was selling them like crazy in all of her different markets. So that was like a major win, right? Because I'm hearing that after just going through this with this man, I'm thinking, that's what I need to do. I need to, dummy Lisa, did you not see this? You could have sold sunflowers every week in your booth. Instead, I'd have them like 2 or 3 times a year in my booth, right? Because it would just be when we thought about it, we'd start them. So that same day on her farm, one of the sessions, which took place inside of her work building, I sat where I had close proximity to her file cabinet, and I was looking at the side of the file cabinet from where I sat, and on that file cabinet was the biggest calendar I'd ever seen. And there was so much stuff written on it, y'all. And I couldn't really make it out from where I was sitting. But first off, I didn't hear one word anybody else said that day. I was focused on that calendar. I'm thinking, the minute we get up from here, I have to get her, nail her and say, what's up with this calendar? What's the story behind it? And believe it or not, I was able to do that. And she very graciously just shared with me that was the brain of her farm. Because everything starts with planting. You back up for your seed starting times, and you look forward to when you're going to plant those, and then everything else, when you order supplies and seeds and bulbs and everything revolves around when you plant something, forwards and backwards of that, right? She shared that with me. And I could just, when I was listening to her, it's like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I've been suffering from. I have been just trying to I just didn't really have a plan. And what plan I did have was on a spreadsheet in a computer, basically, that nobody but me could see. And I was the only person that could make it come true. And we knew that wasn't going to happen because I was always overwhelmed. And the light bulb moment happened when she explained to me that by having it on this paper calendar hanging in their work building allowed everybody on the team to have access to it and to see it and to know what was coming up and what was planned for the future. And I mean, it's like, somebody that does the seed starting can look 4 weeks in advance and say, hey, I better check the seed stock. Do we really have those seeds? Instead of you being the person to discover the morning that you want the person to start the seeds, that the seeds aren't there, right? So that was the light bulb moment for me, that it's like, oh my gosh, this is what I need to do. And so I came home from that trip and bought a calendar. It's hard to find in the middle of the year. But I just went to first writing out my seed starting, when the seeds needed to be started, how many, what the names were, because you also need to know that my seed starter back then was my niece Kelly, who knew nothing about farming or gardening. She just wanted a 1-day-a-week job so she could stay home with her baby. And so she became our seed starter. So she needed very clear, names of the flowers, which color were we talking about, how many seeds. We taught her how to soil block and start in plug trays. Which way was she starting that seed? Actually, it was kind of perfect for her to not know anything, meaning that the complete detail needed to be on the calendar for that seed starting. So this process really started to develop, particularly that first year. And let me tell you what the real epiphany light bulb moment happened so that started earlier in the season by July and August, where in years past, we would hit pay dirt. There'd be no flowers because I never started a second succession. I mean, there might have been a pittance few, but nothing like what we needed. Well, guess what? We had so many flowers, because what happens when you have other people helping you and they can see what the schedule is and they know what their part is, they kind of take ownership and responsibility. So literally, flowers had been born, and I told them where to plant them. We had a planting plan. We had flowers that were starting to bloom that needed to be netted before they were bloomed, actually, that I didn't really even know were out there, that were coming along. And it was the most pleasant affirmation of this process. So that really began the part of this value journey, because all of a sudden, y'all, guess what? We had so many more flowers to sell. And if you've not heard my origin story of my farm, my business model has always been to have more customers than we had flowers. And that meant that we always could sell more flowers. And that made it bittersweet when I would run out of flowers, like in July and August, you know? And so this particular year, the beginning of the new day, we had flowers. And that increased our cash flow so very, very much. I mean, it was, so if you can imagine it, what would happen for me anyway is that we'd be rolling and farming. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh gosh, we got to start seeds. All right, tomorrow everybody's going to start seeds. We start a bazillion seeds. You know, there's not room for them all in the grow room. There's not room on a heat mat. You got all these seedlings, every seed's sitting in blocks, and you're trying to get them all started. Then they all sprout. Then they all have to be under grow lights, which you never have enough of, right? And then, you know, they all have to be planted at the same time. Then they all are going to be coming in at the same time for harvesting. And that was the yo-yo roller coaster that I rolled on for several years. And when I embraced this calendar and really, I mean, I had learned about succession planting. However, I was never able to implement it because I didn't have a plan to follow, an easy to follow plan. And that's what this calendar filled that bill. And my business grew the first year from this. We had more flowers. It was more consistent. The people that was helping me were happier. We weren't so, oh gosh, up and down all of the time. And it just had a major positive impact on my business and the people that were helping me, right? So what would happen is the calendar begins by focusing on when are you supposed to plant your succession plantings. You know, you find those planting dates, and I'm not writing all the flowers we're planting on that planting date. It's like, okay, you know, the second week in April is when I'm planning to plant my first succession of warm season. And when is my second one going? Typically it'd be 4 to 6 weeks after that or so. And then when is the third one? And I would just notate that on the calendar. And then you count back how many weeks it takes you to start seeds and grow them to have them ready to go in the ground on that day. And that's when we start listing details of what flower, what color, how do you start it, how many are you starting. And you do that for each succession. And of course there's multiple successions depending on your first and last frost dates and your winter hardiness zone. But I mean, it just opened the floodgates to normalcy on my farm because seed starting became a part of every week. Planting became a part of every week. Netting became a part of every week instead of having this onslaught of all this stuff you need to plant or all this stuff you need to net, right? It just had such a positive impact on my farm. It was really pretty amazing. And it just helped us to become efficient and organized. I didn't overbuy seeds. We did not have the seeds that we needed. It just really affected every aspect of my farm. That's why I always say this calendar is my flower farm. And so for years, you know, I've purchased this big calendar and filled it out. And we never dreamed that it would be possible to actually produce one. Because it's huge, y'all. It's 20 inches by 30 inches. That's big. And that gives you really big days of the week to have space to write in. That's the key to this. And so I pulled an old name out of my hat of a big commercial printer that used to print our catalogs when we printed a catalog, and made contact with them. And they were not only capable of printing this size and spiral bounding it, they were excited and thrilled to do it. And so thus began the journey of us creating the big calendar, and we've named it Dash Journal. You know, it's got a dash journal, because what happens, y'all, is after you have your first year, that's your first year's journal for your farm. And you find a place to hang it. You know, we have a big nail where they're all can hang together or side by side, on a couple of those, depending on how many years you have. And then when it comes time to plan your next year, the funnest thing happens. I have this day by myself in the middle of winter where I pull out all my previous calendars, line up a couple of 6-foot tables, lay them all out, each one has its own space, and turn them all to January. And then I go back and walk through my life of flower farming and look back. And it happens, y'all. I would imagine it happens to you too. You try to grow a flower and you have a total failure. You get totally discouraged. Maybe you try it again and then you're discouraged. And that's like in your first 1 to 3 years of flower farming. And then you just forget about it because you think you can't grow that. Well, now it's year 6. You have so much more experience. Now you look back on your calendar and it's like, oh yeah, I think I should try that flower again. That's what happens. And that's how I started growing billy balls again, status. All of them I had failed miserably earlier in my career because I didn't know, that they were a cool flower. But you just kick them to the curb. And having this reminder, that's just one little teeny example, helps you to plan. And then what I do on this calendar is I have kind of designated in my mind, the Sunday column on the calendar, that's where we put all of our sunflower successions. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday on the calendar, the columns of Monday, the columns of Tuesday, that's where all of our seed starting goes. Thursday and Friday and Saturday have different sets of notes that we kind of stick to. The Saturday we always like putting whenever we have the first harvest of something. And you know why I do that? Because when you're looking back, if you need to know when do we harvest the first snaps, or when do we do, exactly where to focus on which column and where it is. That's where garden journals failed me. How you can write and write and write, and then you have to look through page after page after page, and there's just having this big calendar that only has 12 pages, and this is not a place to write a book, y'all. This is a place to write significant happenings, and what I choose to write on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Big weather events, things that just really affected your season, maybe. The first harvest. When do I also put on the Thursday column is typically where I put, have beds prepared, like let's just say it's the 3rd week in June. I might put on that Thursday, the 3rd week in June, need to get beds prepared for the 3rd planting, which is coming next month. But because of weather, you want to have options, so you want a heads up about that. There's just so much. You really customize it to you and your need, and you can incorporate your family stuff into it even if you needed to. But us producing this calendar, and y'all, instead of the cover sheet of the calendar just being an advertisement for their next year's calendar, this cover sheet has all the instructions for you to find the multiple successions. It directs you on how to do it. The 1st, 2nd, and 3rd warm, the fall planting, winter planting, if that happens to be you, and very early spring planting, sunflower successions, how to figure out when you start and when you end. It's all going to be right there on the cover sheet of the calendar. So you don't have to pull out every resource you own to figure that out. We are just so pumped over this calendar. I can tell you that, and so our calendar hangs on the back of the door of my work building where everybody comes and goes and has full access to it. Number 1 rule is you only write in pencil. And you do a lot of sometimes erasing, and we have a whole system of how you write your seed starting list, where I put my little check mark to know that somebody's checked stock, and yes, we have that seed. And then when it actually gets started, we highlight it and usually write the date. Seldom do the seeds actually get started on the actual day they get written on. That never happens. But we're not erasing and rewriting it on the day it has done. We just write the date right there where the name is of that flower. Friends, I am super excited So it's coming out in the winter of 2025 to 26. It should be here the end of 2025. And we're just so excited of what the future holds. And it's also called an any year calendar. What that means is it's not you're going to fill in the year that you're in and then fill in the dates on the proper timing for that particular month and year, right? So that just gives you more versatility. If you start in the middle of the year or whatever you want to do, and that means that you can benefit from maybe buying two and paying one shipping because you have this year and next year, because the dates aren't on there. And that's what I always wished I had, but wasn't really available. So this big calendar journal is really, I think it's probably going to be the most powerful resource I've ever created. Because not only is it guiding you in a very simplistic way, but also it's building your journal to look back on, and other people can look back on. And it's really empowered me to do things that I never thought that I would be able to do. It just created and offered so many solutions that had such a positive impact, not only on me, but on my team and the ebb and flow of this farm. And it is what ultimately took me to the next level on succession planting. It's literally what made that possible. So friends, thanks for letting me share where it came from, me seeing it hanging on a farm all those years ago. And then I just took it to the next level, incorporating so much more information. But you also don't want to overload. You want to start very basic at first. Only things that you really need to have on there, and then the only things you really need to look back that'll benefit you in the future. And that's, simple, 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 friends. So you'll find it available on our website and in our phone app shop. You can get on wait lists now if it's not been published or if it's sold out and waiting for the next printing. We'll always have a wait list, and would love for you to get on that so we can let you know when it gets back in stock, because I am super excited for this. And I can't wait for it to be in your hands for you. I mean, we already have people all over the world using the big calendar concept. Now we're giving you the big calendar with the rest of the instructions right there with it, y'all. And so it'll be so helpful. All right, my friends, thanks for joining me. And remember, if you don't want to miss anything with thegardenersworkshop.com, sign up for the farm news. It's at the bottom of every page on our website, as well as it'll be in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining me again here today. And till we meet again, friends. Ciao.